joining him. All right. Good
Hello,
evening.
everyone.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Why are you so freaking loud? Hang on.
Am I really loud?
Yeah, you are off the level. Hang on. Let me check some things here.
That's actually good.
Let's
That means that my USB port is working.
Yes. Let's try again. Say something.
Hello.
Okay.
Testing.
That's better, slightly.
Automatopoeia.
Okay. All right. Apologies. Leftist audio is leftist audio. Anyway. So we are about a week out from our last Armenia show and a few days out from the most exhausting panel I've ever done in my life. But Hetman thought it would be important this evening to fill you in on what's been happening on the ground in the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. So I'm going to let you take it away.
So basically, what we feared would happen did. And it is looking like that the entire Armenian population of Artsakh is going to be leaving. What is very, very sad and very despicable on the part of the Azeris, but it's telling, on my end as a genocide scholar. There's a lot of talk about how they would integrate the population. That's the talk on the side of the Azeri government. But when their representatives show up on news media, they're asked the question of how they would do this, and they have no answer whatsoever. It's very telling that they don't have any plans whatsoever to integrate the population there, and that those who remain, those who are too old or not, just, unable to get out, they are in grave danger. I don't know how, what other way to put it. They're in serious danger. My big fear too is in that region you have so many historical sites, churches, and even you have a fairly good sized city, the capital of that region, Stepanakert. And what are they even going to do? What do they do with this land when they grab it? Is this like a new type of Lebensraum for the Azeri forces? This is something that I don't know what they have planned. But a lot of
Why don't you talk about what they have been doing in the preceding last few days, in particular, between refugees and
Sveta
military
would
actions?
so I am with Sveta today,
Yes.
and she said that she would contribute a bit, but this would be something more that she would know because she has been talking with some people, at least in Armenia, who have talked with the refugees.
Okay. Like, for example, we did see evidence of a very long column of people leaving, 100 kilometers worth of cars of people leaving the area. And that was about 3 days ago.
The UN has sent a delegation. So the UN did send a delegation to, like a fact finding mission to sort of see what is happening on the ground. Um, so my guess is that the Azeris will be on their best behavior for that. But as soon as that delegation leaves, um, anyone else who remains there is in serious danger.
Yeah, there hasn't been a
Um,
whole. I'm sorry.
Hi,
Hi.
hello. Um, yeah, it's been a really difficult week for a lot of us. I would say, in fact, one of the one only, silver lining is that this kind of reignited, our both, our love for art tech in general, but also, like our passion for being involved and our passion for being connected with each other. I've had a lot of difficult conversations, but like also some really nice moments of just us supporting each other right now. Um, I am happy to share if you guys would post them. Organizations that are on the ground that are legitimate organizations that are taking donations if anyone is interested in contributing. But that's one thing we've been doing, but also just being more vigilant because a few days ago this seemed like one kind of the worst case scenario almost, and um now we just have to watch it. So I am definitely you know really wanting to be vigilant and um, kind of actively supportive as we see what continues to happen there because we don't feel, and I do say we as a member of a certain community, um, we we don't we don't feel that this is a standalone conflict at all. Um, and I am very concerned, and I'm not the only one, but I don't want to, I don't want to speak on all our, on behalf of all Armenians or all, Armenian refugees, but I'm very concerned about um, the rest of what's left of Armenia, and specifically um, the areas in our southern province that would provide um, a corridor, basically at this point, so that Azerbaijan and Turkey will share a border and cut us off from one of our few neighbors, Iran. So we would no longer have our tiny little border with Iran, and Turkey and Azerbaijan would be covering most of our borders, with obviously a part being Georgian. Um, but in particular, if you want to look into it more, the place that we're thinking about is Zangezur. I actually have a great grandmother who was born in Zangezur. It is it's a place in the south of our province, Sunik, and um, it is the most logical next step, and we're not just imagining that they're thinking about this or talking about this. They have been using the term Zangezur corridor, Turks and Azeris, to kind of refer to it that way because they see it as a corridor. as opposed to like an actual place where people are from and place where people live. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the next thing to look out for if anyone is interested in kind of following um, the region.
I saw reports of Armenian training soldiers in
Hmm.
Armenia, in Armenia. I saw reports of that just today, where they're preparing. Uh, they appear to be preparing for an attack.
Yeah, and they should be. And that's, I mean, honestly, I am not very hopeful that anyone else is going to get involved to help, and it's probably because of the massive disadvantage going to be horrible to watch.
I think I mentioned it on our last episode, but the timing of this is very, very advantageous for Azerbaijan and Turkey. Um, Mainly due to the fact that Armenia's primary weapons, their primary the primary country where they import weapons from is Russia, and Russia absolutely has uh nothing to provide at this point. All of their efforts are focused on their debacle in Ukraine. And if this, I think that I'm not sure what the terrain is in that area. Is it that a mountainous, that corridor? Is that a mountainous region?
Uh, Yeah, so if you mean, Sunik, the southern province with places like Zangezur being a part of it. Goris is also a city there. This, by the way, both of these places have been receiving a lot of refugees already. Um, yes, it is also quite a mountainous area. If I welcome people to, like Google image search, you'll find plenty, or even videos on YouTube, and get an idea of what it looks like.
So the hope is that, it is defensible. But I mean, as far as I know, Artsakh was quite defensible too, but they still were overwhelmed. Um, we should probably consider doing in the future. It's a conflict that I need to read up on a little bit more, but it was sort of a precursor. A lot of the features of it that you saw in 2020, the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, or
Right,
yeah,
recent, the recent one.
yeah, a lot of the same features of that war you're seeing in Ukraine now. It was sort of kind of like a precursor. Um, the Azeris still had a huge advantage, and they were able to press forward very, very well. I think it would be. I don't think though. I mean, the Armenians fight tenaciously. I don't think that they're just gonna let you know Azerbaijan make that corridor. I don't think it's gonna. They have no way. With Artsakh, as sad as it is, they were at a disadvantage. But once they're on, they're in the internationally recognized territory. I mean, I don't think. I think that they're gonna fight tenaciously, but the issue is can they? If Turkey gets involved, can they sustain, a fight against both? And I don't think that that's possible. I really don't.
Yeah,
I oh,
the
go ahead.
the situation seems at the moment grim. I cannot see a possible. I certainly don't see any political will for any aid to Armenia from the United States, especially in light of the very near government shutdown that we just had like yesterday.
That's what I was just gonna say. Um, there's already fatigue, of course, over continued Ukrainian aid. Um, and I was actually watching C-SPAN during the whole discussion. Um, the thing is though, as I know that this would draw a lot of foreign volunteers to come and, you know, help Armenia. I'm sure you would find, you know, as many foreign volunteers as you did, you know, with the YPG group and of course like the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, because it's sort of a classic example of a, I don't know, you know, a pretty at that point a pretty black and white struggle. But yeah, the thing is if they take that corridor, what more will they want to take? And that's I share Sveta's fears, you know, on what could happen next.
Well, the problem is I don't see any traction for this issue at all outside of very limited circles. Like the entire corridor could be taken and no one would be any the wiser here in the States, it feels like, because it's just simply not getting any media traction.
No, it's not. But how far does it have to go before it does? And the thing is you're dealing with a post-genocidal group, a group with a significantly large diaspora population. That's one thing that I want to mention too, is that there's more Armenians living outside of Armenia than there are living there. Um, and a lot of them, you know, there's a lot of these people in the diaspora. Some of them have been very successful. Um, so I mean, there's definitely a group that's vocal that wants to raise awareness, but yeah, there's no traction. Even, you know, it's not a very well known. I mean, the Armenian genocide definitely, I think, because of Hitler's quote, you know, which is it somewhat proves even true now. But he said, you know, who now, you know, has remembers about the Armenian case, no one will remember about the European Jews. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but you know, essentially, you know, that's sort of kind of his quote, and then the aftermath of World War II is what brought some attention. And I think Raphael Lemkin too had actually written a little bit about the Armenian genocide.
I recall.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the
Um,
BBC has functionally stopped all reporting as of today. They're not playing out any more information out of Armenia as of yesterday. Yeah, let's check the AP wires.
that's, I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. Um, yeah, I don't know. You know, it's a very depressing topic. It's been a very rough week for Sveta. Um, and but I think that one thing that we can do is at least, you know, on our channel, and I mean, when the Ukrainian conflict started, I know we shared a few links. I gave my advice on, you know, the best way to help. Sweta, you know of some charities that are helping refugees, right?
Yes, both charities and other nonprofits. Definitely, the Red Cross, is a name that everyone would recognize. Um, Whatever that therapist organization is, volunteer therapists that help with these events for trauma. Lots of internationally organized organizations. And there are some Armenian created organizations that are also really, doing good work right now. I will share links for people to check out if you are feeling like helping, um, or even just to check out to kind of learn more of the details if you're interested in the history of this conflict.
Yeah, just go ahead and send those links over to. Well, we can put them up in the stream and send those links over to. Why can't I talk today? Uh, to me, so I can put them in our Discord server. Um,
For sure. Yeah, we can do that. This is, out of all the episodes we've had, and we've covered it has been hard for me, with the whole Ukraine conflict, but none of them have come across the Ukraine. Our moments covering Ukraine have been as grim for me as actually reporting back on the situation here, because unlike with Armenia's situation with Ukraine, they've I mean they have a lot of success against their enemy and a lot of support. But here it's a really, the outlook, just isn't good. And it's very hard, emotionally, I think, for all of us to report on it. Um because even at the end of the day, you know, people are leaving. They might flee violence because they're leaving, they're at least going to be spared of that. But you have an entire community that's just been basically, for all intents and purposes, wiped off the face of the earth. I mean, the land, those cities, the villages, all of them are gone. They're gone. So there's not a whole lot of.
this is yeah. Let's to put this in perspective. Basically, the entire Armenian population of the region uh, packed up and left,
Yeah.
except for those who can't, who have effectively been abandoned because there is no help coming for them.
Hmm.
Now you have an influx of close to 100,000 people going into a country that's going to be having a difficult time preparing for that, and then preparing for the prospect of a war that they don't know how where that ends. This is
This is one of my frustrations, actually, and those of us, of my generation who left Baku as children, um, that that the government of Armenia basically, you know, as as far as that, when they do have control, basically hold the future of any Armenians that are refugees in that area, or Artsakh, right? Like, Artsakh existed for as long as Armenia basically continued to fight and occupy it. I mean, they basically, like, even though it to us it's the same country, as far as like that region, Armenia basically had to occupy it because of what was going on. That's the only reason those people continued to live from that year until this week safely and continue to be able to be Armenian. And I have been there personally. And I'm really like, I don't want to, get into too much about my feelings, personal feelings, you can probably imagine. It is very heartbreaking that it's just not going to be an option for me to ever visit again, just like it's not an option for me to visit Baku. Um, in fact, where three of my grandparents were buried. It's not going to be an option for me to ever visit Artsakh again. Um, and I do, as many Armenians who were refugees from, the Baku area in 88 and 89. I do have at least one great grandparent who was born somewhere in Artsakh. In my case, in the city Shushi, um, which is not as big as Stepanakert, but it's a city we all know of. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to add that little bit of context. And the Armenian government, to loop back after my tangent, Yeah, I agree. I think many of us agree that they were poorly, um, like prepared, and um, my apologies. There was a noise here. That they were poorly prepared. We are frustrated with that. Um, they did seem to get more organized. During the week as things were happening, and they were kind of going, "Oh shit, we have to do something. Actually, we have to put some kind of plan and system together." But I've seen some temporary housing units, and you guys can probably find the same things online if you search, that were kind of given to refugees, and of course they look horrific. Um, and again, that's partly poor planning. It's really like when you're already escaping something so horrible, and you when you finally reach what you think of as a safe place, it it's it's really probably extra hard when that place was not prepared for you, and it's also not a place you want to be. And on top of it, we do have um, some some Armenians who were kind of born and raised in Armenia, Armenia, the Soviet Republic, and they are not being welcoming to these refugees, because they actually see them just like they saw us, from Baku, as not as good as them, not being as, I guess, righteously Armenian as them, because we lived so long next to Turks. Um, so there's that. But I want to be clear that of course there are many people who are welcoming, including my relatives there who have been talking to me about this crisis. And I'm glad they're there. Um, but yeah, the Armenian government.
We have
I
a
Go ahead. Go
question,
ahead.
coming in from chat. Palm Dad is asking, is Armenia trying to help get people out? I assume he means from the enclave itself. As far as I can see, they don't have assets to do so. You
Yeah,
might know more than that.
I'm not aware of any organized effort from the Armenian government to help get people out. Now I I could be wrong. It could be happening and I haven't heard of it, but I have not heard of it in any of my conversations. No.
Yeah, I don't know if they have.
I think going back to what we were just saying about, moving forward onto Zangezur and maybe the rest of Soviet Armenia, I think the Armenian government is probably at this point kind of um, maxing out, as far as getting prepared for that, and maybe not giving it as many resources to this refugee crisis as we would like to see, but because of that,
Oh,
if that makes sense.
there's a particular problem. They don't
Mm.
have a lot of well, they don't really have a lot of aircraft that can do this job, like evacuating people, and they don't they they're gonna have a hard time getting things like trucks in there. So I don't know what they
Mhm.
can do at this point because yeah, I
Yeah.
think they only have like two or three transport aircraft and a couple.
Um, yeah, I just again I think they are, and honestly maybe in a more pragmatic view, probably in that sense correctly, uh pretty much like focusing all their effort on being prepared for an actual invasion of you know of Armenia. um and I, in a certain view, I can't even blame them for that. I would love to see more from the international community, um, as far as help with things like that. But I guess as we've learned or confirmed this week, Armenia is not a big enough dot on the radar, um, with all the Western media and everywhere, where we tend to consume information.
Yeah, this is to put this bluntly, this is a unfolding tragedy that I want to say that we're going to read about later on, but I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't, because it feels like in this moment it just feels hopeless, and I apologize for being grim.
You don't have to apologize. It's something that I think a lot of people are feeling right now. It's I want to state that, seeing this happen now has made me a lot more appreciative of the aid Ukraine has gotten, because it has enabled, you know, my friends and people I care about to survive. But I want that same type of exposure and aid to be given to any group in this world that is, under threat like this. There are sort of two schools of thoughts, in genocide studies in regards to, intervention and non-intervention. And to me, I think that intervention is the only way that this sort of tragedy can be averted, and there should be a real, you know, military force dedicated to doing that.
So we never actually talked about this
About intervention versus non-intervention.
back in January. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get to that debate. There have been cases where intervention has caused more problems. For example, Somalia was one.
Yes.
And Somalia casted a shadow on Rwanda, where intervention would have saved countless, hundreds of thousands of lives. It also casted a long shadow onto Bosnia as well.
Can I
Um,
can I lay something out for you?
yes.
I think you're correct in that if there is going to be a force that is job will be to prevent genocide, then it needs to be specially assembled and trained for the difficulties at hand.
100%. And it can't be, there are so many, it has to be unrestrained in some ways to be able to use violence to prevent violence. The UN
Yes,
has failed miserably, at preventing genocide. And sort of that was one of the reasons why it was founded, to avert tragedies like what happened in the Second World War. The only time I can really think where the UN did what it was formed to do was in Korea, which was a very hard fought war. But ultimately, it's a war that saved, at least part of that peninsula from totalitarian rule, and you can see the results today of that action. After the Korean War, the UN has been just dismal in their record, in my opinion. And they were too little, too late, for example, to prevent a lot of the big tragedies in Bosnia that occurred. Their shadow also, the shadow of Srebrenica was cast over Kosovo, and now we're actually seeing Serb forces. I don't know if you looked at the news gather outside of there. I'm thinking
Yes.
it's a lot more saber rattling because certainly an attack on Kosovo would elicit a response by NATO, and I think that they know that. But if they catch him at the right moment, and honestly, Kosovo's own existence, and I know people like I have some friends who are Albanians, some friends who are Serbs, but its own existence is rather controversial. But a large part of its formation, the intervention that happened, which was also not without controversy, was due to massacres that were not prevented, like Srebrenica, for example.
Which we talked about
That
at
real
some length.
Yeah, we talked about Srebrenica in our genocide episodes.
Bonanza. Yeah.
Bonanza.
Yes, it was a bonanza. It was a lot of nights of work. That was like the longest sustained bit of research I think I've done so far.
You
Um,
mean for Srebrenica?
for the entire genocide series in
Oh,
general.
for sure, for sure, for sure.
Between the UN articles and Lemkin and the documents behind that, there was a whole lot in that.
Of course, yeah. It's research I didn't necessarily have to do, but for you, it was something to catch up on, or something to get informed about. But
Here's I think the problem with what we're proposing that I think would be brought up almost immediately. Suppose you have an international force um, that gets into a scrap with, like, say, Azerbaijani forces who are, killing people.
yeah,
How that doesn't turn into an escalation with other countries. Like what you're looking at ultimately is something along the lines of a not-for-profit private military contractor, right? Because
yeah.
anything else, and that has implications that really bother me on a lot of levels for reasons I suspect you would get almost immediately. But
No, of course, I 100% get it. It's not. This is the big, polemic among genocide scholars is how do you, create a response force that can act objectively in every situation and respond in that way. It's almost impossible. It's very hard. Because all of the countries that would contribute troops to this task force all have their own interests, and many of these interests will conflict with each other, with other countries. Sometimes, probably countries within that task force.
well, even that
For example, the Security Council, the UN Security Council, it's completely a mess because
the UN
it's
Security
the
Council
interests of the states in the Security Council go against each other.
principally
So
hampered by the fact that Russia and the United States are both on the council. Lancer McMahon, and the only reason the UN was able to succeed in Korea was because the Russians walked out of the vote in protest. They learned a lesson to never repeat their mistake. Yes. Uh,
yeah, Korea was one of those things where Stalin he actually he gave the go ahead for Kim Il Sung to reunify the peninsula. He was a lot more reluctant actually for the Chinese intervention, believe it or not.
yes.
And he was very reluctant to get involved himself.
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. But like rolling back around to this concept, like the thing I immediately think of is you can't have such an organization that has to be free to maneuver and get in fights. It can't be bound to a nation. Like suppose you have a organization like Task Force 1200 or something,
Yeah,
anti-genocide force, and it's comprised of troops from various member states of the United Nations. What happens if a Azerbaijani soldier kills an American soldier on this task force? Does that trigger Article 5 of NATO?
I know that's also
That's
a
that's
that's the slippery slope of this whole thing is yeah. Um That's what makes it, super hard. It almost would have to be a like supranational force that's not beholden to any government. So yeah, like you're saying, almost like a private military contractor, but you can't do that. You couldn't equip such a force for that task. And also, what if it's there to prevent genocide that is being committed possibly by a member of the UN Security Council or a nuclear state? How do you intervene? And what are the limits of intervention? What can you do to intervene? um I don't know how to answer it. It's a very difficult question, but it almost, and not to rehash the term never again, but it almost basically proves how weak and powerless that term is. It doesn't um it
Now I know that who Tim McMahon is. Who establishes the RRE for such a task force? That is another excellent question. Like, how do you get set up rules of engagement? There's not really a set of best practices that you can just jump into, like corporate best practices you can jump into in that state. And I think you're right. I think there's a significant problem with um, a significant problem with a sort of toothlessness. Like genocides happen and there's no response in some places. Ethnic cleansings happen and there is a response. And like it's almost capricious in how the relationship between international relations and whether or not you get help in these circumstances. And like that's the thing we're focusing on here for Armenia. Uh, yes, it's Commander Macmillan. That's the thing you focus on here for Armenia is there's it feels so capricious that there's no help going to be forthcoming. And like
yeah.
there's nothing to stop a slow grinding war from breaking out in Central Asia over this. And then no one will pay any attention. Like even conflict, like even situations that persist to this day in Syria and the borders around Syria and Turkey and Iraq are like no
They're not
one's
pleased
really
at all.
no one's
No
really
one's
paying
Yeah,
attention in
no one's
any
paying
meaningful
attention
way.
to that. People are losing attention with Ukraine. I always thought that when possible, a pragmatic approach needs to be taken. And it isn't to say, like, for example, in the events leading up to Ukraine, there's always there are some people who argue, that this was always going to be the outcome, but we're never 100% sure of that. It's one of those things, you know is preventing a war diplomatically, even if there's it puts one country at a huge disadvantage over another, is preventing a war, and maybe a bad a bad peace coming out of that prevention, better than aiding a country in a war starting, essentially. Like, I don't know what the answer is to that. I really don't.
I
um
feel like there's a conventional wisdom to this, and then there's a military history wisdom to this, uh, to speak of. And the conventional wisdom is people want peace at all costs, and they'd rather have a bad peace than a war.
yeah.
Um, but like for example, from Ukraine's perspective, it makes no sense to yield the Donbass and the areas that they would have had to yield
No,
to
100%.
survive.
Of course.
Because even if they did that, even if they pulled their troops out and reestablished a new set of lines elsewhere, and Russia never attacks Kiev, it doesn't matter. Like Russia just turns around and does the same thing again and they don't know when to stop. Like a bad peace is not ever advisable.
No, it's 100%
And like
true. I mean, it's
Armenia
kind of
can't
like,
negotiate a
yeah.
bad peace either without being willing to fight somewhere, because
And
this
that's
is
the problem that, a lot of people in Armenia are really like, I mean, Sveta and I were talking about it. They're really upset at the current prime minister and the government for not fighting, for not, engaging in a fight, even if it was, doomed. And I
this
reason why they didn't is because he knew it was a doomed fight. And he's in a very difficult position, but he can't. At some point, you have to fight. That's the thing. And Ukraine had to fight. They still are fighting, and Armenia most likely will be in that situation very soon. You know, but the issue is whether or not they will win that fight. And you know, I'm sure they're going to fight valiantly. I am sure they're going to
it really
give up.
depends on what Azerbaijan is aiming for.
Yeah. If they're aiming to establish that corridor, I think that, you know, if you look on paper, militarily, they have all the advantages. If Turkey gets involved, I mean, that gives them even larger advantage. But the hope is at least the international community, if they did something that blatant, condemning this, but those same sanctions would have to befall Turkey, and they would have to befall Azerbaijan. I would even say more damaging, or just as damaging as the ones that have been, placed on Russia, if not more so. Because I don't think that they've been even harsh enough.
The sanctions have been a tricky bit. Yeah, Commander Chamberlain proved in 38
But
impeachment
sanctions
never
could
worked.
certainly have a bigger impact
They
on
have
the
a bigger
country.
impact in Azerbaijan, but they won't necessarily have a
Not
bigger
on
impact on
Turkey.
Turkey.
Yeah.
Because, well, Azerbaijan is very badly situated in terms of, being an expansionist power. They're in a rough spot, which is why they're picking a fight with someone they're sure they can win, which is probably what Russia should have done. That's beside the point. Uh, there's a significant problem, I think, for Azerbaijan. It doesn't have the economy to ride out sanctions. It doesn't have the reserves to ride out sanctions the way Russia did.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say is, Azerbaijan's not prepared for that. They don't have a large enough or strong enough economy, like you just said, but Turkey certainly could.
Turkey could.
I feel
And
like
there's a very
I feel
strong
like
chance.
actually that if anything, that those sanctions placed on both of them it will draw them closer towards
Russia.
Russia and China.
Like the real hope is Turkey doesn't get involved, and I haven't seen any evidence yet, other than Turkey's sheer cussedness that Turkey would get involved. The problem, and the commander's right. The problem with appeasement is that it just spurs the enemy on.
It does, for sure.
There's a point, and I get, just to put it in perspective for our viewers, I get why the prospect of war and why they're critical of it. But for Armenia, this is a do or die situation, and there's
It
no
is,
guarantee
for
of
sure.
success. Like this is the people that can be wiped out in less than a generation. Like any war is going to be devastating to them, but a sustained, protracted conflict could see that their people just wiped out.
100%. And it's one of those things too where they don't have the means to sustain a defense for a long time. Yeah. I'm hoping that maybe we can, especially if our viewers are interested, please let us know in the comments. Maybe Daedalus and I could do
We're doing pretty good today.
Yeah, maybe we could do a episode on the 2020 conflict. And we would do this episode mainly on the military aspect of it. And it would kind of give us an idea a little bit more about, I'm sure that some U.S. Army college studies have come out on the 2020
I was
conflict.
actually in the hospital at the time, so I didn't pay that close attention, so I'd have to catch up.
It was interesting, because it was right at the height of the pandemic, but I remember that the Azeri Ministry of Defense was putting out videos of their Bayraktar drones. Like, I mean, just really vivid videos of them hitting Armenian soldiers. And it was almost just hard to watch that because they were unedited. You could see them launch the missile, hit the soldiers in the trenches. There's even more.
YouTube
Like
frowns on combat footage, so we can't show it. But yes.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to show it for any episode, but I just remember seeing it, and it was just really grotesque. I don't really know of any, up until that time, of any other government doing that. Showing such vivid videos of soldiers just of night vision or anything.
Yeah. So for the moment,
But
this is a fairly fluid situation.
it is, yeah.
I hate to sit here and be the prophet of doom. However, this is the kind of thing that I was. This wasn't exactly what I was talking about when we decided to do this channel, this project. But it's one of the things that fits into that forgotten, ignored place to shine that light. So
it's good that we have that there is a platform that we are able to provide provide a platform to these victims and these people, and means for perhaps some of our viewers ourselves can help some people there, because as you said, it's not something, it's even major. Like the BBC hasn't covered it in 2 days. I think more and more is going to be coming out with the UN fact-finding mission, but as I said before, the Azeris can certainly wait before escalating this again. They can wait. They can wait even a year or two before they take that corridor.
Yeah, they have time.
I suspect that something's gonna happen before then, because they're gonna want to do that before it can be fortified, before the Armenians can dig in.
Yes. With here's the expectation you would find for such a conflict, is it's going to be not dissimilar to what we're seeing in Ukraine now. Static trench warfare. Neither side is going to have sufficient air power, really, to be able to fight a kind of war that Russia was looking for.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that is probably all that we can comment on this issue now. Our next episode that we're going to be trying to do is on men's health. Unless something happens with Ukraine or
actually
Armenia.
We have a scaffolding of a schedule for much of October.
We do, yeah.
We do for October 9th, which is I need to look at a calendar. Hang on, I'm bad at this. October 9th, though, we should be provisionally we're being joined by Commander Macmillan, used to show up on the In Time show for Ukraine, and we'll be doing our Ukraine update. There has been, well, a couple things happening. Not a whole ton more movement than we had initially thought of last episode. But October 9th, that is the provisional time for that. We have a show coming up with NC, if you've met them on the Cathedral before, towards the end of the month, where we talk about Sparta and Sparta being overrated. And
I'm looking forward to that episode, actually.
On the 15th, I am going to be over on Zanzi's Left Thinking podcast to talk about political beliefs. I'll post the links for that when the time comes. But we sort of have a schedule coming that we intend to follow, except we absolutely won't because we're horrible at this, but that's beside the point.
Daedalus and I will be, and actually, I'm thinking that we should do it maybe for our maybe an anniversary or 300 subscribers. But we are going to have a match on. We are going to have a match on Rome Total War.
Probably
So
sooner rather than later, so that Hetman doesn't forget.
no, I'm not going to forget. In fact, actually, I have the means to prepare now, so I'm going to actually practice. Okay, everyone. That'll be all for tonight, and hopefully, our next episode will be a little bit more upbeat. I'm really sorry for all of these. This is life. I mean, this is history's unfolding, and it's this is the human experience. It's not sunshine and roses. But these topics need to be discussed, and I think that if something worse happens, Daedalus and I will be at the forefront of discussing it in regards to this topic. So, yeah, stay tuned to more content in the future.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.